I remember the weight of that ceremonial robe like it was yesterday, heavy silver thread catching the torchlight, scratchy wool collar digging into my neck. Not exactly what you'd call comfortable wedding attire, but comfort wasn't really the point that night. Peace was. The elders had spent weeks preparing the sacred clearing, pine branches woven into arches, ancient symbols carved fresh into the center stone. Howls from all 12 territories echoed through the mountains as I walked that dirt path toward Sawyer Wilkins, the Alpha commander who'd agreed to take me as his mate, his Omega, the final piece to unite our fractured lands. Never thought I'd end up here, if I'm being honest. Growing up, I figured I'd maybe find a nice beta from my home territory, settle down after serving as a border guard for a few years. But then Victoria Ferguson, our elder mystic, had that vision during the winter solstice, said the spirits showed her the only path to avoid the coming bloodshed, a bonding between mountain and coast, between Sawyer and me. The Alpha needs his Omega, she told our council, her weathered hands trembling as she gripped her walking stick. Balance must be restored. I wasn't anyone special before that. Just Ashlyn Sullivan, decent tracker, fair fighter, known for keeping a level head during territory disputes. But apparently, I had the right bloodline, the right energy signature, the right whatever it was the spirits were looking for. So there I stood, heart hammering against my ribs, watching Sawyer's face as I approached, 6'4" of pure intimidation in his ceremonial blacks, that thin scar across his left cheek looking stark white against his tanned skin, steel gray eyes giving nothing away. Kneel before the sacred stone, Elder Victoria instructed us both. The crowd fell silent, 200 pack members from all territories holding their breath. I caught Tony Nunez's eye in the front row. He gave me a tiny nod. We'd spent the last 3 months coordinating the logistics of this whole peace summit. Now it all came down to this moment. Sawyer knelt first, his movements fluid despite his size. I followed, the cold stone seeping through my ceremonial leggings. Up close, I could see the silver at his temples, the tiny lines around his eyes. 35 years old and already legendary among our kind. Commander of the largest territory, widowed 2 years earlier when his mate Christine died in the first border skirmish. Elder Victoria moved between us, raising her arms. Tonight we witnessed the joining of Alpha and Omega, of mountain and coast, of strength and wisdom. Her voice carried farther than seemed possible for someone her age. Through their blood bond, ancient enemies become one pack, one family, one future. The ritual began with the ceremonial cups, fermented berry wine mixed with sacred herbs, bitter stuff that burned all the way down. Then came the vows, words passed down through generations. Sawyer's deep voice never wavered as he pledged protection and provision. I promised balance and guidance in return. Then the blood rite. Victoria drew the ceremonial blade across my palm first, quick, shallow cut that stung like hell. I pressed my bleeding hand to the stone, then to Sawyer's chest, right above his heart. He did the same, his large hand completely covering mine when our palms met. Blood to blood, heart to heart, soul to soul, the crowd chanted. Something electric shot up my arm at his touch. Not just nerves, something deeper, more primal, the beginning of the bond. I gasped, nearly pulling back from the intensity. Sawyer's eyes widened slightly, the only indication he felt it too. Victoria wrapped our joined hands with a length of red cloth. What the spirits have chosen, let no pack divide. Alpha and Omega, now bound as one. And just like that, I was married, to a man I barely knew. For the good of everyone, the celebration afterward was exactly what you'd expect when you get 200 werewolves together with barrels of wine and plates of roasted venison, lots of howling, dancing that got wilder as the night wore on. I smiled until my face hurt, accepted congratulations from people whose names I struggled to remember, and tried not to think too hard about what would happen when the party ended. "You're doing fine, Dustin," one of my younger trainees whispered as he passed me another cup of wine. "Everyone's buying it." Buying what, I wanted to ask. This wasn't an act. The bond was real, or at least it was supposed to be. Across the clearing, Sawyer was deep in conversation with Ernest Hansen and Roger Montgomery, his top advisors. He hadn't looked my way once since the ceremony ended. "Time for the newlyweds to retire," someone shouted around midnight. A chorus of howls and suggestive whistles followed. My stomach dropped to my feet. This was the part I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The final stage of the bonding, the physical claiming that would seal our connection permanently. Sawyer finally approached, offering his arm without meeting my eyes. "Shall we?" he asked, voice low enough that only I could hear. The walk to his cabin, our cabin now, I supposed, felt 10 times longer than it actually was. Neither of us spoke. The sounds of celebration faded behind us, replaced by the familiar night chorus of crickets and distant owls. Inside, someone had prepared the space with traditional touches, fresh pine boughs on the mantel, red candles burning low, the bed turned down with clean furs. Sawyer closed the door, then just stood there, shoulders rigid beneath his ceremonial blacks. "So," I said, because someone had to say something. "That went well, don't you think?" He moved to the small table in the corner, poured water from a pitcher. The political objectives were achieved. The territories are officially united. Not exactly romantic wedding night talk, but I hadn't expected poetry from a man like him. I began unfastening the complicated silver clasps of my ceremonial robe. Victoria says the blood rite is just the first step. The bond needs to be, I faltered, searching for the right words, completed. "I'm aware of the tradition." He took a long drink of water, still not looking at me. My fingers stilled on the clasps. "Is something wrong?" When he finally turned, his expression made my blood run cold. Determination, resignation, but not a hint of desire or even basic warmth. "I agreed to the public ceremony," he said flatly. "I agreed to the political union, but I won't be completing the bond." The words hit like a physical blow. "What but the ritual, the peace treaty?" "The treaty stands. The territories are united under my leadership, with you as my official mate. That's what matters to the council." I struggled to process what he was saying. But without the full bond, it's just theater. The spiritual connection that's supposed to balance your power with mine won't be necessary. He removed his ceremonial jacket, hung it precisely on a wooden peg. "You'll have all the privileges and protections of my mate. You'll attend councils, you'll be treated with the respect due to your position, but there will be no true bonding between us." My cheeks burned hot with humiliation and confusion. Why even agree to the ceremony if you never intended to complete it? Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Gone so quick I might have imagined it. Politics required a mate. The territories needed this symbol. He gestured between us. "But I had a true mate once. I can't form that bond again. Christine, his dead wife, the woman whose ghost would apparently be sharing our bed." "You could have told me," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "Would it have changed anything? Would you have refused your duty to the territories?" He had me there, and he knew it. Peace had always been bigger than my personal feelings. "The guest quarters are through that door." He nodded toward a side room I hadn't noticed. "Your things have been moved there." And that was that. My wedding night, spent alone in a stranger's guest room, the ceremonial robe still half fastened around me, the blood on my palm barely dry. I stood in that cold room, listening to Sawyer move around on the other side of the wall, and tried to make sense of my new reality. Married but not mated. The Omega without a true bond to her Alpha. A symbol of unity built on a foundation of emptiness. Years of awkward tension stretched before me. Political theater we'd have to maintain every day. A performance with no end date, no escape clause. What had I gotten myself into? 5 years. That's how long I lived in that fortress by the coast, watching waves crash against the jagged rocks below, while my life settled into something that wasn't quite living but wasn't quite dying either. 5 years of waking up alone in the Omega quarters, nice enough rooms, sure, with tall windows and sturdy furniture, while Sawyer commanded everything from the opposite wing. Couldn't have put more distance between us if he'd tried. First winter was the hardest. The wind howled through every crack in those stone walls, and I swear it matched the howling inside me. My wolf paced restlessly each night, confused about why we weren't with our mate, why the bond remained so thin and fragile between us. I'd wrap myself in 3 blankets and still feel cold all the way to my bones. Meetings were the worst. Twice a week, regular as clockwork. I'd sit at that long table with the other pack leaders while Sawyer stood at the head, all business in his dark clothes and that commander insignia he always wore. Omega Sullivan has prepared the Eastern Border Report, he'd say, and everyone would turn to me with those careful expressions. Not pity exactly. Nobody dared pity the Alpha Commander's wife, but something close enough to make my skin crawl. Thank you, Alpha Commander, I'd answer. And we'd dance our formal dance in front of everyone, Commander and Omega, leader and advisor. Everything except husband and wife. After about 6 months, I couldn't take the emptiness anymore. Needed something to fill my days besides staring at maps and writing reports nobody really needed. Found Dustin first, skinny 19-year-old kid with more energy than sense, tripping over his own feet during patrol drills. You're thinking too much, I told him one morning after watching him fail the same maneuver 3 times. Your body knows what to do if you'd get your brain out of the way. He'd looked at me with those wide amber eyes. You really think I can do this, Omega Sullivan? Wouldn't waste my breath if I didn't. Started training him that afternoon. Then Maggie joined us a week later. Quiet, watchful girl with the best tracking instincts I'd seen in years. Before long, I had 5 young pack members showing up at dawn, eager to learn from the Omega who'd once been the best scout in the Eastern Territories. Tony found me about a year in, caught me reorganizing the supply shed one rainy afternoon when I couldn't stand being inside anymore. With respect, Omega Sullivan, that's not how we track inventory, he'd said, clutching his clipboard like I'd personally offended his ancestors. Your system makes no sense, Tony. Why are the winter supplies behind the summer ones when winter's coming first? He'd sputtered something about categorical organization versus temporal necessity, and somehow by dinner we'd redesigned the entire logistics system for the compound. After that, Tony became my project partner. We'd spend hours working out more efficient supply routes, better storage systems, smarter ways to distribute resources during the lean months. The work helped. Kept my hands busy, my mind focused on something besides the hollow space where my bond with Sawyer should have been. I'd fall into bed exhausted most nights, too tired to notice the emptiness beside me. Sometimes our paths would cross in the Great Hall or the training grounds. Sawyer would nod, always polite, always distant. Omega Sullivan, like we were strangers who'd just met, not people who'd stood before the sacred stone and pressed bleeding palms together. Alpha Commander, I'd answer, and we'd both pretend this was normal, that every wolf in the pack couldn't sense the wrongness between us. 3rd year, I stopped waiting, stopped hoping he'd change his mind, stopped imagining scenarios where he'd suddenly appear at my door and say he was ready to complete our bond. Started building something that felt like a life instead. You're different, Maggie said one evening after training. We were sitting on the cliffs, watching the sun sink into the ocean. She'd become quite the fighter by then, strong and quick, with that hawk tattoo on her shoulder that she'd gotten after her first successful border defense. Different how, I asked, though I knew what she meant. More? She tilted her head, searching for the word. Settled, like you've stopped fighting something. She was right. I had stopped fighting, stopped raging against what couldn't be changed, and started working with what I had. My trainees were becoming leaders in their own right. The supply routes Tony and I designed had reduced winter shortages by almost 30%. I was contributing, making a difference, even without the power of a completed mate bond. 4th year brought the northern threat. Nathan Matthews and his corrupted pack pressing at our borders, testing defenses, looking for weaknesses. The meetings became daily, tension thick enough to choke on. I'd watch Sawyer's face grow grimmer with each report, the silver at his temples spreading a little further. One night, after everyone else had left the war room, I stayed behind, studying the map with its red pins showing enemy positions. They're looking for a way around the western ridge, I said, not looking up. If we move 3 units here, we can cut them off before they find it. Sawyer had been silent so long, I thought he might have left. Then, how can you be sure? It's what I would do. He'd considered the map, then nodded once. Do it? First time he'd ever accepted one of my suggestions without debate. Small victory, but it felt enormous. By year 5, We had a rhythm, Sawyer and I. Professional respect, careful distance, shared purpose without shared intimacy. My wolf had stopped howling quite so loudly, though the ache never truly disappeared, just became part of the background noise of my existence, like the constant crash of waves against the cliffs. "You've done good work with Dustin," Sawyer said during one of our rare private conversations. We were standing on the ramparts, watching my trainee lead a patrol along the northern boundary. "He shows real promise." "He's ready for more responsibility," I replied, trying to ignore how my pulse quickened at his nearness, how my wolf stirred hopefully whenever he spoke directly to me. Some instincts never die, no matter how thoroughly you bury them. "I'll consider it." He'd almost smiled then, a slight softening around the eyes that disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. Those moments were the hardest, tiny glimpses of what might have been, what should have been between us. The connection that flared briefly before being carefully extinguished. Each time left me raw, like picking at a wound that never quite healed. But I had purpose, had respect from the pack, if not love from my husband. Had Dustin and Maggie looking to me for guidance, Tony seeking my input on supply decisions, even the council members beginning to defer to my judgment on certain matters. I'd built something meaningful within the strange constraints of my life. Still, every night as I closed the door to my private quarters, my separate solitary space, I'd feel that familiar hollowness, the weight of the incomplete bond, the knowledge that across the compound, behind his own closed door, Sawyer felt it too, no matter how successfully he pretended otherwise. 5 years of living with the ghost of what should have been, 5 years of making peace with what was, until the day everything changed. Nobody saw them coming. That's what haunts me most. 6 years of peace, fragile as it was, just crumbled like sand between our fingers. I'd been up since dawn that morning, training Dustin and Maggie on perimeter sweeps. The sky had that weird yellowish tinge, like right before a storm hits, but without the smell of rain. "Something feel off to you?" I asked Maggie, who'd stopped mid-stride, her nose twitching. She shook her head. "Can't place it, Ashlyn. Just wrong." We'd finished early and headed back to the compound when the first messenger crashed through the gates, blood soaking his left side, eyes wild with terror. Bill Peterson, one of Sawyer's most loyal, practically fell from his horse, gasping for air. "Northern border. Breached." He wheezed as Peter Morrison caught him before he hit the dirt. "They've come back." The words hung in the air like smoke. The Northern Territories had been forbidden for generations, sealed by ancient pacts and warded by our mystics. Nobody crossed those boundaries. Not us, not them. Until now. I remember running to the command center, my heart hammering against my ribs. Sawyer was already there, standing rigid over the large oak table with maps spread across it, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. When our eyes met, something passed between us. Not warmth, exactly, but recognition of the storm we were facing together. "Ashlyn," he said simply, nodding toward the empty space beside him. Not affection, but acknowledgement of position. "How bad?" I asked, scanning the maps. "Bad." He pointed to 3 marked locations. "They're moving faster than should be possible. And they're not just attacking, they're—" He stopped, struggling with words, which was unlike him. That's when Ernest Hansen, Sawyer's strategic advisor for nearly a decade, filled in the horrible truth. "They're turning our own against us." I didn't understand at first. Thought he meant politics, alliances shifting. God, I wish it had been that simple. "Show her," Sawyer ordered. And Brooke Glass, our communications officer, stepped forward with a small wooden box. She opened it with trembling fingers to reveal a glass orb, cloudy with swirling darkness inside. "Captured this morning," Brooke explained, "from the border outpost." She pressed her palm to the surface, and the mist inside cleared enough to show images, like watching through dirty water. I saw Roger Montgomery, our security chief, a man who'd shared meals at our table dozens of times, standing before 3 hooded figures. One reached out, touching Roger's forehead. Black veins spread across his skin, up his neck, into his eyes until they turned completely dark. Then Roger turned, calm as anything, and opened the security gate to let enemies pour through. What the hell is that? My voice sounded strange, distant in my own ears. Dark magic, Victoria Ferguson said from the doorway. The elder mystic moved slowly toward us, her walking stick tapping a somber rhythm against the stone floor. Ancient workings we believed were lost to time. Roger would never, I started. It's not Roger anymore, Sawyer cut in, his voice flat. Not his mind anyway. They're taking our people and turning them into puppets. The next few days blur together in my memory, a nightmare of reports flooding in, of trusted allies suddenly betraying their posts. Marcus Sims, who'd protected the Eastern Territories for 15 years, slaughtered his own council before anyone realized he'd been corrupted. We couldn't tell who was still themselves and who might be compromised. Worst was watching it happen in real time. 3 days after the first attack, Meadow Carpenter, our most decorated border captain, led her entire unit in a revolt. I'd been coordinating supplies with Tony when the alarm sounded. We raced to the eastern wall just in time to see Meadow's unit firing on our own people. Through binoculars, I could see her face, calm, almost peaceful, as she directed the slaughter. Black veins pulsed visibly across her cheeks, even from a distance. We can't fight our own people, I whispered to Tony. Watching guards I'd trained myself fall under arrows loosed by their former comrades. If they're not themselves anymore, what choice do we have? He answered grimly. Sawyer ordered containment rather than counterattack. Capture, not kill, whenever possible. But it was a losing strategy against an enemy that grew with every person they corrupted. Traditional warfare was useless against this threat. How do you fight when your enemy wears the faces of people you trust? The turning point came by accident. I'd been helping evacuate an outpost that had been compromised when I spotted Johnny Blair, one of our best scouts, moving unnaturally through the shadows toward our escape route. The black veins on his neck told me everything I needed to know. I signaled for the others to go ahead while I circled behind him. My plan was simple: disable, not kill. Johnny had taught Maggie everything she knew about tracking. He'd been at our wedding, for God's sake. I tackled him from behind, and we rolled across the forest floor, grappling for advantage. His eyes were completely black, vacant of recognition. He fought with unnatural strength, his hands closing around my throat. Desperate, I grabbed his wrists, trying to pry his fingers loose. That's when it happened. A surge of heat shot up my arms, like fire in my veins, but not painful. Johnny's eyes widened in shock. The blackness in them seemed to crack like ice, spiderwebbing across his irises before dissolving entirely. He gasped, his grip loosening as he blinked rapidly. "Ashlyn," he croaked, looking around in confusion. Where are we? What happened?" I stared at my hands, then back at him. The black veins had disappeared completely from his skin. "Johnny, is that really you?" He nodded shakily. I remember walking patrol then. Nothing clear, just darkness, like being underwater. Watching myself do things, but unable to stop. I helped him back to the compound, keeping my hand on his arm the whole way, afraid the corruption might return if I broke contact. But it didn't. Johnny remained himself, confused, traumatized, but free of the dark influence. Sawyer was skeptical until Victoria examined Johnny thoroughly, confirming the corruption was completely gone. Not suppressed, eradicated. "How is this possible?" Sawyer demanded, pacing the length of the medical tent where Johnny rested. I told them exactly what happened, showing them my hands as if they might reveal some clue. I just touched him, and something flowed through me. Victoria's eyes narrowed, studying me with unsettling intensity. She approached slowly, taking my hands in her weathered ones, turning them palm up. "The mark of your bloodline," she murmured, tracing the small crescent birthmark on my right wrist. I suspected, but I wasn't certain until now. "What are you talking about?" I pulled my hand back. Victoria straightened, looking between Sawyer and me. "You're a truth-seer, Ashlyn. Extremely rare. Your lineage was thought to have died out generations ago." "A what?" "A truth-seer. One who can perceive magical deception and undo it through direct contact." Victoria's voice took on the formal cadence she used for ceremonial occasions. "Your touch breaks the corruption, reveals the truth beneath the lies." My mind raced, thinking of the implications. "So I can help them, all of them? I can bring them back?" Victoria nodded slowly, but her expression remained grave. In theory, but your gift is undeveloped, raw. What you did with Johnny was instinctual, powerful, but limited. How do I develop it then? I asked, hope rising for the first time in days. If I can save our people. The gift of a truth seer, Victoria said carefully, her eyes flicking to Sawyer, reaches its full potential only when the bearer is completely bonded to their true mate. The tent fell silent. I felt the blood drain from my face as understanding dawned. You mean I couldn't finish the sentence? Victoria nodded. Yes. Your power can only be fully realized through a completed mate bond with Sawyer. I didn't dare look at him. The weight of 5 years of rejection, of sleeping in separate wings, of maintaining the facade of a union while living with its hollowness, all of it crashed down on me at once. There has to be another way, I whispered. There isn't, Victoria said simply. The ancient magic requires balance, the alpha's strength with the omega's truth. One cannot reach full potential without the other. Now I did look at Sawyer. His face had gone completely still, unreadable even to me after all our years together, but not together. The future of our people, the salvation of those already lost, now hinged on a bond he'd refused to complete since the day we wed. The others had left us alone in the command room. Maps still covered the table, marked with the spreading corruption. Each red X another person turned against us. Another life we might lose if we couldn't stop this. I planted my hands on the edge of the table and leaned forward. We need to talk about this. Sawyer's jaw tightened. He kept staring down at the maps like they might suddenly reveal a different solution. There's nothing to discuss. I pushed away from the table. Did you miss what Victoria just said? I can break the corruption, but only if we complete our bond. He finally looked up, his gray eyes hard as stone. It's not an option. Not an option, my voice went up, and I didn't care who might hear. Our people are dying. They're being turned against us. Johnny was ready to kill me before whatever happened. And Victoria says I could help more of them if we just... I said no. His voice cut like a blade. I paced across the room, my boots loud against the wooden floor. You know what? I've respected your boundaries for 5 years. 5 years, Sawyer. I've never pushed. I've built my own life here. I found my place. But this isn't about us anymore. He turned his back to me, shoulders rigid under his dark uniform. I'm aware of what's at stake. Then why won't you even consider it? I moved toward him, stopping just short of touching him. What aren't you telling me? The muscles in his neck tensed. For a second I thought he might just walk out. End the conversation right there. Wouldn't be the first time. Instead, he said, it's dangerous. So is doing nothing while Nathan Matthews corrupts more of our people. You don't understand, he turned to face me then. And something in his eyes made me step back. The bonding ritual isn't just some ceremony. It's unpredictable. I crossed my arms. I'm not afraid. You should be. He ran a hand through his hair, those silver streaks at his temples catching the light. Victoria doesn't know everything. She doesn't know what can happen when it goes wrong. That stopped me. Goes wrong? What are you talking about? His eyes darkened. For a long moment, he just stood there, like he was fighting some inner battle. Then he walked to the window, looking out at the compound below. Christine died during our bonding, he said finally, his voice so low I almost didn't hear it. The air left my lungs. What? Christine, my first mate. His knuckles went white where he gripped the window frame. We were halfway through the bonding ritual when something broke. I lost control. My wolf. I stepped closer, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. Sawyer, what happened? He turned, and the raw pain on his face hit me like a physical blow. The bond was too strong. My wolf wanted to claim her completely, possess her. It overwhelmed her. She wasn't strong enough to handle it, and I couldn't pull back. I felt her slipping away while I was still locked to her, and there was nothing I could do. God, I whispered. 5 years of distance suddenly made sense. 5 years of formality and cold politeness. It wasn't rejection. It was fear. I watched the light leave her eyes. His voice cracked. I killed her, Ashlyn. My mate. My wolf killed her because I couldn't control it. I reached for him without thinking, but he flinched away. That's why you've kept your distance, I said. All this time? He gave a short, bitter laugh. You thought I was just cold? Unfeeling? I've been fighting my wolf every day. Every hour we've been under the same roof. It recognizes you as mate. It wants to claim you, complete the bond. He shook his head. I can't risk it. I won't. I tried to process this. 5 years living side by side, and I'd never guessed. Never understood the battle he'd been waging. You've been protecting me, I said, the realization washing over me. Trying to. He looked exhausted suddenly, like admitting the truth had drained what little energy he had left. My wolf is stronger than most, more demanding. The elders matched me with Christine because they thought her gentle nature would balance me. They were wrong. I thought about the ghost that had haunted our marriage from day one, Christine. I'd imagined her as competition, a memory I could never live up to. Now I understood she was a warning. And you think the same would happen to me, I said. His eyes met mine, intense and afraid in a way I'd never seen before. I know it would. My wolf has only gotten stronger, more frustrated after years of denial. If we tried to complete the bond now, he shook his head. Best case, I'd mark you so deeply you'd be bound to me forever. No escape. Worst case, I'd die like Christine. He flinched at the bluntness, but nodded. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. But Victoria said I'm different, a truth seer. Maybe that changes things. Maybe it makes it worse, he countered. More power flowing between us. More chance for something to go wrong. I looked at the map on the table, at all those red marks. People we knew, people who needed us. So we just do nothing, I asked? Let our people fall to corruption because we're afraid? I'm not afraid for myself, he said sharply. I'm afraid for you, what it would do to you. For the first time, I really saw him. Not just the alpha commander, not just the distant husband who'd rejected our bond, but the man who'd been carrying this weight for years. The toll it had taken was written in the lines of his face, the tension in his body, always holding back, always in control. 5 years, I said softly. You've been fighting this for 5 years. Every day we've lived here together. He looked away. It was the only way. I thought about all the times I'd felt rejected, unwanted, all the nights I'd lain awake wondering what was wrong with me, all the mornings I'd seen him across the compound and felt that hollow ache. And all that time, he'd been protecting me the only way he knew how. You should have told me, I said. Would it have changed anything? He asked. Would it have made it easier to live with a mate who can never truly be your mate? I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe knowing wouldn't have changed our reality, but it would have changed how I carried it. The weight of his revelation settled between us, not just what happened to Christine, but what it meant for us now, for our people, for the choice we faced. It started with the sounds, not howls or battle cries. Those would have been normal, expected. This was worse, the soft shuffle of familiar boots moving wrong through the corridors, the whispers that weren't quite right, the way Ernest's voice carried down the hallway, giving orders that didn't make any goddamn sense. I'd been standing at the north window of the strategy room, counting the guards at their posts, when I caught sight of Ernest Hansen leading 6 of our scouts toward the eastern gate. All wrong. They were supposed to be heading west, toward the reinforced positions we'd set up the day before. Shit, I muttered, pressing my palms against the cold stone windowsill. Through the glass, I watched Ernest's face. Known him 5 years, seen him plan 100 defensive maneuvers with meticulous care. But now his eyes had that glazed milk film look I'd seen on Johnny before I'd cleared him. The corruption had gotten to Ernest, and nobody knew yet but me. I sprinted down 3 flights of stairs, taking them 2 at a time, boots slapping against stone. Too late. By the time I burst through the heavy oak doors to the courtyard, Ernest had already disabled the eastern alarm system. The tall iron gates swung open, and 20 or 30 figures slipped through the gap, moving with that same wrong rhythm that made my skin crawl. Close the gate, I screamed, but the guards just stared at Ernest, confusion written all over their faces. He was the strategic advisor, second only to Sawyer. Why would they question him? The commander authorized this entry, Ernest announced, his voice flat and emotionless. Stand down. One of the younger guards, couldn't have been more than 19, stepped forward, hand hovering over his knife. But sir, protocol says... Ernest's hand shot out, grabbed the boy by the throat, and snapped his neck in one fluid motion. The sound, Christ, that awful cracking sound, echoed across the suddenly silent courtyard. The guards froze, stunned stupid by what they'd just seen. That moment of hesitation cost them everything. The corrupted pack members swarmed in, moving with unnatural speed, tearing through our people like they were made of paper. I ran back inside, slamming the doors behind me. Needed to find Sawyer, needed to warn everyone, but the corruption had spread faster than we'd realized. 3 corridors down, I skidded to a stop. Dustin, my trainee, the kid I'd been teaching for 5 years, stood over the body of Captain Peter Morrison, blood pooled around Peter's head, his throat torn out, and Dustin just stood there, looking down at his handiwork, with those same milky eyes. Dustin, I whispered, my voice breaking. Dustin, it's me. His head snapped up, nostrils flaring. He didn't recognize me, didn't recognize anything. Just another puppet with cut strings. I backed away slowly. Couldn't help him now. Not without Sawyer, not without completing our bond. The fortress was falling apart around me. Everything we'd built, all our defenses, useless. We'd trained for decades to repel physical attacks, to defend against armies and assassins. But this, magic that turned our own people against us, we had nothing for that. From the west wing came the sounds of fighting. I sprinted toward it, hoping to find Sawyer or Victoria or anyone who wasn't corrupted yet. Instead, I found a massacre. Roger Montgomery, once our security chief, systematically executing anyone who questioned the new orders coming from Ernest. 5 bodies already lay at his feet. I ducked behind a stone column, heart hammering in my chest. We'd prepared for everything except betrayal from within. Every defensive position, every fallback point, every emergency protocol, all of it useless when the enemy knew our plans before we executed them. The first explosion hit while I was halfway to the inner sanctum. The whole building shook, dust and small stones raining down from the ceiling. The eastern wall, I realized. They'd breached the eastern wall. The second explosion came 30 seconds later, closer. The southern corridor collapsed inward. I heard screams, then nothing. I reached the inner sanctum, a reinforced chamber designed to protect the pack's most vulnerable during attacks. But when I pushed through the heavy doors, I found chaos. Corrupted guards had already infiltrated, moving through the room with mechanical precision, separating those they wanted to turn from those they simply wanted dead. An elderly woman reached for me, fingers grasping at my sleeve. "Help us," she begged. "Please." A corrupted guard, someone I'd shared meals with just days ago, grabbed her by the hair and dragged her away. I couldn't save her, couldn't save any of them. Not alone. I slipped back out, heart pounding in my ears. Needed to find Sawyer, needed to end this. The war room. If Sawyer was anywhere, he'd be there. Central command, reinforced walls, one way in and out. I took the back corridors, avoiding the main hallways where most of the fighting echoed. The smell of smoke filled my lungs, something burning in the east wing, probably the archives. All that history going up in flames while we tore ourselves apart. When I reached the heavy double doors to the war room, 2 guards still stood at attention. Bill Peterson, scarred face grim but determined, and a younger guard I didn't recognize. Bill's eyes met mine, clear thank God, and he nodded once before stepping aside. "Commander's inside," he said, voice low and tight. "Situation's bad, Omega." "I know," I replied, placing my hand briefly on his shoulder. "Watch your back, Bill. They're turning our people faster than we can track them." The war room was barely controlled chaos. Sawyer stood at the center, barking orders as runners came and went with reports. His face was carved from stone, no emotion showing as he absorbed the catastrophic news from all sides. Maps spread across the massive oak table showed the corruption's spread, red marks consuming our territory like a disease. Brooke Glass hunched over her communications array in the corner, fingers flying as she coordinated what remained of our defenses. Her short black hair with those purple tips was matted with what looked like blood on one side. She didn't look up when I entered. Ashlyn. Sawyer's eyes found mine across the room. Something flickered there, relief maybe, before his mask slammed back into place. Report. Ernest Hansen's corrupted. He's opened the east gate. Dustin, too. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. They're inside the walls, the inner sanctum's already compromised. A muscle in Sawyer's jaw twitched. That tiny movement contained more emotion than most people show in an hour of crying. Brooke, he called over his shoulder. Status on the western perimeter? Still holding, Commander, she replied, pressing a headset to her ear. Captain Morrison's second is... She stopped suddenly, head tilting as she listened to whatever was coming through her earpiece. Her face went pale. No, that's not right. Confirm that report. The doors behind me burst open. Bill Peterson stumbled in, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. Commander, they've breached the... Something hit him from behind. Someone. A blur of movement. The younger guard who'd been standing watch with him. The kid's eyes had gone milky white, his movements jerky and wrong as he drove a knife into Bill's back. Sawyer moved faster than I'd ever seen, across the room in a heartbeat. He grabbed the corrupted guard by the throat, lifted him clean off his feet, and slammed him against the wall with enough force to crack the stone. But it was too late for Bill. He slid to the floor, blood pooling beneath him, eyes already going distant. Seal the doors, Sawyer roared. 2 remaining guards rushed to obey, pushing the heavy wooden doors shut and dropping the iron bar into place. It wouldn't hold them long. Brooke's voice rose in panic from her corner. Commander, we've lost contact with the western perimeter. All stations going dark, one by... She never finished. The communications array exploded in a shower of sparks. Brooke screamed, her body convulsing as whatever magic powered the corruption surged through the equipment and into her. I lunged toward her, thinking maybe I could do what I'd done for Johnny. But Sawyer's arm caught me around the waist, yanking me back. Don't touch her, he growled. Brooke's body went rigid, then relaxed. When she turned, her eyes had that same milky film. Without a word, she reached for a knife at her belt. One of the guards put an arrow through her eye before she took 2 steps. She crumpled without a sound. That's it, I said, rounding on Sawyer as the remaining guards formed a tight circle around us. This ends now. Something heavy slammed against the doors from outside. The wood groaned. The iron bar held. But for how long? You can't keep treating me like I'm made of glass, I hissed, grabbing the front of Sawyer's shirt. I'm not some fragile thing you need to protect. I'm your goddamn mate. Another crash against the doors. The hinges squealed in protest. They're dying out there, our people, and we could stop it. My voice cracked. Victoria said it herself. My power and yours, together. It's what we were meant for. Sawyer's eyes were wild, something primal lurking just beneath the surface. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand exactly what I'm asking, I shouted, pushing him hard in the chest. I'm asking you to trust me, to believe I'm strong enough to handle what comes, to stop making decisions for both of us out of fear. The doors splintered at the edges. The corrupted were breaking through. If I lose you, he whispered, the words barely audible over the assault on the doors. You won't, I promised, taking his face between my hands. But if you don't trust me now, you'll lose everything else. The iron bar across the doors bent with a metallic groan. We had seconds, maybe. Sawyer's carefully constructed walls, 5 years of rigid control and emotional distance, finally crumbled before my eyes. His shoulders sagged, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he pressed his forehead against mine. I can't control it, he admitted, voice breaking. My wolf, when it takes over, then don't control it, I said. Let me in instead. My wolf, he said, voice barely above a whisper, has been fighting for dominance every moment since they brought you to me. I froze, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Every single day, his fist clenched at his side. Every night knowing you were just across the compound, my wolf clawing inside me, demanding I claim what's mine. The pieces clicked together in my head. All those times I'd caught him looking at me during council meetings, the way he'd sometimes take a step back when we ended up alone in a corridor. It wasn't disgust or disinterest. It was restraint. 5 years, he continued, of keeping my wolf caged because the alternative was watching you die like Christine. The sound of fighting grew louder outside the war room door. We didn't have time for this conversation, but we couldn't move forward without it either. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Would it have changed anything? His eyes finally met mine. Would knowing I wanted you, that my wolf has been howling for you, make sleeping alone in your quarters any easier? I stepped closer, close enough to smell the mix of sweat and pine that always clung to him. Yes. His jaw tightened. The desire to claim you completely has grown unbearable. He spat the word like it tasted bitter. But the fear of watching the life drain from your eyes while my wolf tears you apart from the inside, that fear kept me paralyzed. For the first time, I truly saw him, not as the alpha commander who'd rejected our bond, but as a man haunted by his past, terrified of repeating it. The walls he'd built weren't to keep me out. They were to keep his wolf contained. Sawyer, I reached for his hand. He flinched but didn't pull away. I've understood the risks for years. No, you don't. I do. My fingers tightened around his. Victoria explained everything to me 3 years ago. His eyes widened. What? I asked her why the bond felt wrong, why my wolf kept pacing and howling. She told me about Christine, about what happened. And you stayed? Disbelief colored his voice. I stayed because I recognized what you were from the moment I saw you across that ceremonial clearing. The truth I'd never spoken aloud tumbled out. You were my true mate, not just some political arrangement the elders cooked up. My wolf knew it before I did. A crash sounded from somewhere down the corridor. We were running out of time. It doesn't matter now, he pulled his hand away. We can't risk. We don't have a choice. I moved into his space, forcing him to look at me. I need my truth seer abilities at full strength, and you need an Omega who can undo this corruption. The only way forward is together. His breathing quickened. Ashlyn, I can't control. Then don't. I grabbed his shirt, bunching the fabric in my fist. Complete the bonding, now. No. That's an order, Commander. The words came out fierce, not a request, but a command. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something darker, hungrier. If I start this, he growled, I won't be able to stop. Good, I tilted my chin up. Because I've been waiting 5 years for you to claim what's yours. His control snapped like a bowstring pulled too tight. One moment we were standing a breath apart, the next his mouth crashed against mine, desperate and demanding. His hands gripped my waist, lifting me against the war table, maps crumpling beneath us. Mine, he growled against my throat, teeth grazing the sensitive skin. My wolf howled in triumph, surging forward after years of being denied. The bond that had remained incomplete for so long flared to life, a burning connection between us that grew stronger with each passing second. I felt his wolf pushing against mine, massive, powerful, and fierce. But instead of tearing me apart, it wrapped around me like armor. The fear that had haunted him was unfounded. We weren't Christine and Sawyer. We were different, balanced. When his teeth finally broke the skin at the juncture of my neck and shoulder, completing the physical claim, something exploded inside me. Power surged through every cell in my body, a rush so intense my vision blurred and my ears rang. This was what Victoria had meant, the full activation of my truth-seer abilities, unlocked by the completed bond. The world around me transformed. Colors sharpened, scents separated into distinct threads. And most importantly, I could see it, the corruption. It hung in the air like oily black smoke, seeping through the cracks under the door, searching for new hosts. I can see it, I gasped, pulling back from Sawyer's embrace. The corruption, it's visible now. His eyes, still dark with desire, cleared slightly. What do you mean? It's like... I struggled to find words. Like black smoke. I can see where it's concentrated, where it's spreading. The pounding on the war room door grew louder. We didn't have much time. We need to move, Sawyer said, helping me down from the table. Can you? Yes. I straightened my clothes, feeling stronger and more centered than I had in 5 years. The bond hummed between us, a constant reassurance of his presence. I can identify who's corrupted and who isn't. And I know I can break it through touch. Sawyer nodded, his alpha authority settling back over him. But different now. We were partners, equals. Then we fight. He handed me a knife from his belt. Together. When we opened the war room door, 3 guards rushed us. I could see immediately which one was corrupted. Black tendrils wrapped around his mind, puppeting his body. I ducked under his attack, grabbed his wrist, and pushed my newfound power through the contact. The effect was instantaneous. The black smoke evaporated, and the guard collapsed to his knees, gasping like he'd been underwater. Recognition returned to his eyes. "Commander," he croaked, looking up at Sawyer. "What happened?" "Later," Sawyer said, pulling him to his feet. "Right now, we need to clear the fortress. Ashlyn can identify who's corrupted." We moved through the corridor systematically, Sawyer protecting me while I identified and cleansed those we could save. Not everyone survived the process. Those who'd been corrupted longest sometimes couldn't withstand the shock of returning to themselves. In the East Wing, we found Peter Morrison leading a group of corrupted soldiers. The black smoke around him was thicker than most, coiling tight around his chest and throat. "Peter was one of the first taken," Sawyer murmured. "I'll try." Breaking Peter's corruption took more strength than the others. I grabbed both his wrists, channeling everything I had through the contact. The black smoke fought back, trying to maintain its hold, but our new bond gave me reserves of power I'd never imagined. When Peter finally gasped and slumped forward, sweat dripped down my back from the effort. "Ashlyn?" Peter blinked rapidly. "Commander, what happened?" "You were corrupted," I explained, steadying him. "But you're back now. We found Leah Willis in the medical wing, corrupted hands mixing poison instead of medicine. Freeing her was easier than Peter, perhaps because her healer's spirit fought alongside me against the invasion. They made me hurt people," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as awareness returned. "My own patients." "Not you," I told her firmly. "Them, and now you can help us save the others." With Peter and Leah restored, we gained momentum. Each person we freed joined our ranks, helping us secure sections of the fortress. The tide was turning. By nightfall, we'd reclaim the main compound. I stood in the central courtyard, exhausted but exhilarated, as Sawyer gathered the freed pack members around us. Our bond thrummed with shared purpose and power. "Listen to me," I called out, my voice carrying across the assembled fighters. What happened here today was just the beginning. Nathan Matthews and his northern sorcerers targeted us first because they feared what we could become. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. They were right to fear us. I raised my hand, letting them see the silver-blue energy that now danced across my skin, the visible manifestation of my truth-seer abilities. Because together, we're going to take back every inch of territory they've stolen. We're going to free every pack member they've corrupted. Sawyer stepped forward, his presence commanding. "We ride north at dawn. This ends where it began, at Matthew's stronghold." A cheer went up from the gathered wolves. I looked at their faces, determined, angry, ready for battle. Peter stood tall despite his ordeal, already organizing strike teams. Leah moved through the crowd, treating injuries and preparing medical supplies for the journey. "They never expected us to fight back like this," I said, turning to face our people. "They never expected an Alpha and Omega working together, bonds complete, powers united." Another cheer, louder this time. "Tonight we rest and prepare," I continued. "Tomorrow we show the North exactly what happens when you attack our home." The corrupted Northern forces had no idea what was coming for them. With our bond complete and my abilities awakened, we had a weapon they couldn't counter. For the first time since this war began, hope burned bright in our fortress, not just of survival, but of victory. I never figured I'd be the one to save us all. The ride north took 3 days. 3 days of me learning what it meant to have powers that weren't just active, but damn near explosive. The bond with Sawyer had unlocked something in me that felt like a river breaking through a dam. Every mile we rode closer to Nathan Matthews' territory, the stronger the currents got. First time I sensed one of Nathan's traps. I nearly fell off my horse. We'd been following a narrow path through dense forest when something prickled at the edges of my vision, like heat waves, but tinged purple and pulsing with wrongness. "Stop," I called out. my voice sharper than I'd intended. 30 riders halted behind us. Sawyer pulled his mount alongside mine. "What is it?" I pointed to the seemingly ordinary stretch of path ahead. "There's something there. Can't you see it?" He squinted, then shook his head. "Nothing. It's—" I struggled to find words. "It's like a net, hanging in the air. Anyone who passes through gets marked somehow." Peter Morrison, recently freed from corruption, moved forward. "I don't see anything, but I trust your eyes more than mine now." I dismounted, approached the invisible barrier, and reached out my hand. The air felt thick, resistant. When my fingers touched the unseen field, it shimmered, briefly visible to everyone. A web of sickly purple energy stretched across our path. "Holy shit," someone whispered behind me. I pressed both palms against it, letting that heat flow from my core, down my arms. The web dissolved like sugar in hot water, leaving nothing but clean forest air. "That would have tagged us," I explained, climbing back onto my horse. He'd have known exactly where we were and how many. Sawyer's expression shifted from surprise to something fiercer, pride, maybe. "Find us another way around." That became our pattern. I'd spot the magical barriers, traps, and markers that no one else could see. Some were meant to corrupt, others to track, a few designed to kill outright. Each one I dismantled taught me more about how Nathan's power worked, the signature of his magic becoming as recognizable to me as a fingerprint. By the second day, I was directing our forces to avoid entire areas where the corruption hung thick as fog. We moved through the landscape like ghosts, undetected. Nathan's scouts passed within yards of us, their eyes sliding right past as if we weren't there. "He doesn't know we're coming," Johnny Blair whispered on the evening of the third day. He'd been the first I'd cleansed, and now he shadowed me like he owed me his life. Maybe he did. That's never happened before. He always knows. We made camp that night in a protected hollow. Around the fire, I spread out a map and placed stones to mark what I'd sensed. "His power flows from here," I said, pointing to a mountain peak, "but it's not evenly distributed. These 3 points—" I placed dark stones at strategic locations. "They're like amplifiers. Take them out, and his reach weakens." Sawyer studied the map, his shoulder pressed against mine. That casual contact would have been unthinkable a week ago. Now it felt as natural as breathing. "Strike teams," he decided. 3 groups hit the amplifiers simultaneously. Then the main force pushes for the center. I nodded. "I need to lead the team heading for this one." I tapped the stone closest to Nathan's stronghold. "It's the strongest, and it's got defenses the others don't." Sawyer's jaw tightened. I felt his protest before he voiced it, our bond thrumming with his concern. "I know you want to protect me," I said quietly, "but that's not how this works anymore." He held my gaze for a long moment before nodding once. "You take Johnny and Leah's unit. I'll coordinate the other strikes." The attack began at dawn. My team moved through the forest like shadows, guided by my ability to see paths untainted by corruption. When we reached the first amplifier, a standing stone circle that looked ancient but hummed with fresh malevolence, I directed the placement of our fighters with absolute certainty. "There," I pointed to a spot where the energy pulsed weakest. "Hit it there, and the whole structure collapses." Leah Willis, her eyes still haunted from her time under corruption, nodded and positioned her best fighters. At my signal, they struck with concentrated force, physical and magical combined. The stone circle shattered with a sound like a thunderclap. I felt the breaking ripple through the landscape. And somewhere distant, I heard Nathan Matthews scream in rage and pain. He knew we were here now, but it was too late. The other teams reported similar success. With each amplifier destroyed, Nathan's power contracted. His corrupted forces became disoriented, easier to free. By midday, we stood at the foot of his mountain stronghold, and I could see the corruption swirling around it like a hurricane, black and purple energy lashing out in desperate patterns. "He's trying to rebuild his network," I told Sawyer as our forces regrouped, "but he can't extend it far without the amplifiers." Sawyer's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining. "How do we get in?" I studied the swirling darkness. "There." I pointed to what looked like random fluctuations, but were actually rhythmic weaknesses. The pattern shifts every 17 seconds. We move in pulses, timed with the weakness. Coordinating 200 fighters to move in precise timed bursts should have been impossible. But Sawyer and I moved as one mind, our bond allowing us to communicate without words. His strength complemented my sight. Where I identified openings, he marshaled force to exploit them. We breached the outer defenses in under an hour. Inside was chaos. Corrupted wolves fought alongside creatures I'd never seen before, things twisted by Nathan's magic into grotesque shapes. But they were fighting blind. I could see the strings controlling them, and with each touch, I severed those connections. There, I shouted above the din of battle, pointing to a tower rising from the center of the compound. That's where he is. I can feel him pulling everything toward that point. Sawyer nodded grimly. Cover us, he ordered a squad of our best fighters. Then to me. Lead the way. The tower was a nightmare of traps and barriers, but I navigated them like I'd been born to it. Each step upward, I felt Nathan's fury growing, his power concentrating as his reach diminished. By the time we reached the top chamber, he'd pulled all his remaining energy into himself. He stood waiting for us, a tall, gaunt man with white hair streaked unnaturally black. His eyes shifted colors as I watched, never settling on a single hue. The Truth Seer, he hissed, his voice layered with harmonics that made my teeth ache. You should have been impossible. Funny thing about impossibilities, I said, stepping forward. They tend to happen anyway. He launched his attack, not at Sawyer, but at me, a torrent of corruption that would have consumed anyone else. But I saw it coming, saw how it was constructed, and simply unraveled it. The magic dissolved between us like mist before sunlight. Nathan's face contorted with disbelief. He tried again, drawing deeper from his reserves. Again, I dismantled his work with a gesture. You can't touch me, I told him, and I can see everything you are. What happened next was less a fight than a systematic dismantling. Every spell he cast, I countered. Every defense he raised, Sawyer tore down with brute force guided by my insight. We moved together like we'd been partners for decades, not days. When Nathan finally fell, his body crumbling like ancient parchment, the corruption throughout his territory unraveled all at once. I felt it snap like a cut string, felt the rush of clean air replacing the tainted magic. The northern threat was finished. The journey back was quieter than our advance. Our victory had cost us, not as many lives as it might have without my abilities, but each loss still weighed heavy. Yet there was something else building underneath the grief, something that felt like a new beginning. Sawyer rode beside me now, not ahead. When decisions needed making, he turned to me first. The others noticed. I caught their glances, the raised eyebrows, the small nods of approval. This wasn't just an alpha tolerating his ceremonial mate. This was partnership. One night, as we camped under stars so bright they hurt to look at, Sawyer found me sitting alone by a small fire. You know, he said, settling beside me, I spent 5 years thinking the ceremony was enough. That keeping you safe meant keeping you at a distance. I poked at the fire with a stick. And now? Now I understand what Victoria was trying to tell us. It was never about an alpha protecting an omega. His hand found mine, warm and solid. It was about balance. Your truth, my strength. Neither complete without the other. Something loosened in my chest, a knot I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten it was there. Took you long enough to figure it out. He actually laughed, a sound I'd heard so rarely it startled me. I'm a slow learner. Good thing I'm patient then. We sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between us. I thought about that first day in the sacred clearing, how terrified I'd been of this man, how I'd imagined our life together and gotten it all wrong. The reality had been harder, lonelier, but what we'd forged through that hardship was something stronger than any arranged political bond. This was what my wolf had recognized from the start, not just a mate, but a true partner. As we rode back into our territory the next day, I realized we weren't just returning home. We were bringing something new with us, a model of leadership our people hadn't seen before. Not an alpha with his symbolic omega, but equals with complementary gifts. The old boundaries were gone. The territories united not by political arrangement, but by something deeper. the same bond that now hummed between Sawyer and me, unbreakable and true.